Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Mark's Movies. This is my second round at this. Thank you for watching. I hope you like this and subscribe. Please enjoy. The comment section is there for y'all to start a discussion on. I want there to be a discussion about movies. I hope it to stay to the movies that I discuss in the videos, but if you would like to make other suggestions for movies to talk about later, or things of that nature, give suggestions of ideas, because I have a lot of ideas for what to talk about. I love movies, and I love talking about movies. You can ask any of my friends, that's what they'll tell you. So, but for those of you who don't know me, I want you to get to know me a little better. So this video, in honor of the fact that it's right around my birthday, I'm now 39 years old, by the way, I wanted to discuss more about my love of movies and for y'all to get to know me a little better. So I'm today going to just talk about the fact that one of the things about me that I love is that I watch movies because of who made it. Sometimes it's the actors or actresses, sometimes it's the director or the writer, usually not the producer, but sometimes it's the director or writer. And I'll watch a movie just because they're in it. They did it. They made it. So today, I'm going to discuss my top 5 favorite directors of all time. Now, this was a difficult list to narrow down, I'll be honest, because there are a lot of great movie makers out there. One of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to make it where all 5 of the filmmakers had a large, extensive filmography, and 4 of them do. One of them I wouldn't budge on, though, so that's fine, and I'm going to start with him, actually. But the other 4 have large, extensive filmographies that are varied, even in the fact that, for instance, 2 of them are very famous for one particular genre, but even in that genre, the movies run the gambit of being sometimes more thrilling, sometimes more comedic, sometimes more action or adventure or whatever. So, without further ado, let's get into the list. And then at the end, I'll be discussing another movie that I feel like went under the radar that people should see. So, to start off with, let's discuss Quentin Tarantino. I love Quentin Tarantino. He's only made 9 films. He's written 11. He's directed 9 himself, because he lumps the Kill Bills into one film. I mean, what can be said about Quentin Tarantino? Let's be honest. Like I said, he's made 9 movies. I could name them off right now. In fact, let's do that. Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Jackie Brown, Kill Bills, Volume 1 and 2. He did the Grindhouse film, Death Proof. Then you have Inglourious Bastards, Django Unchained, The Hateful Eight, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Those are his movies. They have a lot of similarities. There's that quick writing of his, the fun dialogue, the interesting and different way of talking. I mean, you have so many great quotes from Quentin Tarantino movies, because that's one of the things he's famous for, is his dialogue. But one of my favorite things about his most recent movies, even though, to be honest, my top 2 favorite movies are his first 2 movies. Pulp Fiction is number 2, and Reservoir Dogs is my favorite. Still to this day, my favorite movie of his. But even after that, every time I think he made a movie, he got better. And that's one of those things as an artist that's interesting to me. I love it when they improve on what they do. I love it how they take the things that they know and try to explore areas that they may not know as well or may not be as good at. But he took it and ran with it. I mean, look, he made a Grindhouse film, Death Proof. He made a samurai revenge picture, Kill Bill. He made probably the most ridiculous thing of all. He made a Western. He made a Western in The Hateful Eight, which is my 3rd favorite Quentin Tarantino movie, by the way. I love all of his movies, but it's my 3rd because of just the time he takes. Like, if you watch the extended version, it's about 3.5 hours long. I saw it in theaters where there's an intermission. It is a beautiful movie, literally the opening scene of which is a 5-minute shot of a stagecoach rolling through snow in like Utah or Wyoming. It is beautiful, but it's got that great dialogue that you're expecting. So there's a magnificent speech by Samuel L. Jackson about halfway through that is all the things you want from a Quentin Tarantino speech, and a Samuel L. Jackson speech for that matter. He kills it. But it's also got the great Walton Goggins. It's got Jennifer Jason Leigh, Kurt Russell, Tim Roth, Michael Madsen, a lot of familiar faces for those who are Quentin Tarantino fans. It's well worth a watch. Like I said, I don't really think most of his movies need an introduction. I don't really feel like I need to talk about Pulp Fiction more than it already has, because let's face it, it gets a lot of attention. I will like to shout out the 2 films that he wrote that he didn't direct. So his first 2 movies came out about 2 years apart, 92 and 94. And in between those movies, he wrote 2 others that were directed by other people. One was Natural Born Killers, which stars Juliette Lewis, Woody Harrelson, and Robert Downey Jr. as Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis play 2 lovers, 2 star-crossed lovers. You know the old story. But these 2 murder her father and then go on a killing spree. And it's directed by Oliver Stone. So, the man behind Platoon. It's got a lot of interesting, and Wall Street. So it's got a lot of interesting elements there. It's about media and our obsession with people who are famous for things like what I'm doing now, to be honest. So it's definitely definitely an interesting movie to watch. And then there's the great True Romance. Directed by the late, great Tony Scott. I mentioned Unstoppable in the last video. It's one of those movies that I think everything just works for it. The writing is great. The directing is great. The cast is why you watch this movie. Like I talked about just a second ago. If there's no other reason to watch this movie, let me give you the reason. The actors, Patricia Arquette is in this movie. You've got Christian Slater's in this movie, Christopher Walken. You've got Gary Oldman. You've got Brad Pitt. The cast is great. And then it's also got one of the best performances, one of the most understated and underrated performances by the legend that is Dennis Hopper. I very much recommend True Romance. All right, next, let's bounce back to the old days. This filmmaker got his start in the silent film era and made movies all through the 70s. He's mostly known for making Westerns, and his name is John Ford. The reason I love John Ford, I got introduced to Westerns by my father, who loves John Wayne movies, and John Ford made a lot of John Wayne movies. She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, The Searchers, Rio Grande, Stagecoach, all of which are John Ford and John Wayne collaborations. But I'm going to bring up 2 in particular because they are, like, if you've never seen an old movie and you want to dip your toes in, these 2, I don't think you can go wrong with these 2. One of them is a tale of a boxer who kills a guy in the ring and decides to live a quiet life after that and never fight again. So he buys his ancestral home in Ireland and moves to Ireland from New York. And when he gets there, he's just looking for a nice, peaceful life. And what he finds is the love of his life, played by the great Maureen O'Hara. John Wayne plays the boxer. And a little bit of turmoil in the fact that her brother doesn't really like him, and all of the things that go from there. The reason to watch this movie, John Wayne gives probably my favorite performance of his career, to be perfectly honest. I know most people want to talk about Rooster Cogburn and True Grit, not a John Ford movie, but and that is a great performance. It won him an Oscar. But to me, if you want to see the man and all of his suave charm and his just gentleness and his humor and his strength and fragility and all it's so layered. It's very nuanced. The performances, you got to watch him in The Quiet Man. And Maureen O'Hara is always great. I really can't speak enough. I feel like people overlook John Wayne as an actor because he's mostly known for Westerns, so I felt like I needed to dive into him a bit. But Maureen O'Hara is just phenomenal, always. Whether it be the other times she worked with John Wayne and pick a Western, she's in like 5 with John Wayne. Or whether she's in The Parent Trap, or whether, whatever. She made movies through the 90s, and she was always delightful to see. I love Maureen O'Hara. So the reason to watch this movie is it's beautiful. Another reason to watch this movie is it's beautiful. The way he shot it is the way he shoots everything else. The scenery, the background, the landscapes are equally as important in the storytelling as the dialogue or the action. You can see it from Stagecoach. You can see it from pick a movie I named already. The Grapes of Wrath. He made The Grapes of Wrath. You can see it in that. He loved landscapes, and he gets to film in Ireland. So, in all of its beautiful, lush, green, just rolling hills, and it's just gorgeous. It's one of the most beautiful movies you'll ever see. And his influence and the way he films is seen throughout. You know, you go to Francis Ford Coppola or you go to Stanley Kubrick, and the way they framed every shot perfectly. John Ford was the guy. Him and Orson Welles were two of the best at that earlier on. So definitely recommend a good watch if you love older movies. Another one, if you're willing to dip your toes into the realm of westerns, this is a good one to start with. I feel like, because it is not a full-on western like you always hear. It's not about the gunfights. It's not about the charging horses. It's not about those things. This is a politician, an aging politician played by the great Jimmy Stewart, telling his story and it's told in flashback of how he started his campaign, started his early career, and became the legend that was the man who shot Liberty Valance, which is the name of the movie. John Wayne plays rare second fiddle to Jimmy Stewart in this movie, but he is equally as interesting, equally as charming, very quiet. He's very reserved in this, and the movie is so good because of that comparison between the two characters and Liberty Valance himself. It's another movie where if you can write whole papers on the man who shot Liberty Valance and its beauty and its intricacies and its ability to tell the story through shadow, because it's in black and white, and lighting and things that are revealed and things that aren't, and foreshadowing, and how the black and white nature and the candlelit nature is very good at, revealing things or hiding things. There's a lot of things to unpack in this movie, but on its surface, it's just a really good movie. All right, next. This person needs no introduction. The next two need no introduction. Actually, the next three, let's be honest, need no introduction, need no description. So we'll just hit up the highlights. But with all three of them, there's a lot of highlights. And this one is Steven Spielberg. I mean, I already mentioned that my favorite movie of all time is Jurassic Park. It is wonderful. It is entertaining and thrilling. I love every bit of it. And it's a perfect example of how good he is. You can go back to Jaws. You can go back to The Color Purple, Empire of the Sun, E.T., Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Hook. All of those great movies from the 70s, 80s, and 90s that he made. Saving Private Ryan. Lots of fantastic films under his belt. And then there's, of course, Raiders of the Lost Ark and the sequels. He is the creator of the PG-13. Well, they created it for him because the backstory quickly was that there was a lot of movies that came out in the mid-'80s that people were like, well, that's a little worse than a PG movie, but it's not quite rated R. We need something in between. And some of those movies were Gremlins, which he produced, Poltergeist, which he produced, and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Let's face it, when you rip someone's beating heart out of their chest, it's going to cause some, interesting. That's a PG? Interesting. So that's what happened. It wasn't all his. Other movies did too, but those were some big ones. But I want to highlight a couple of movies from the 2000s and later that he made that I feel like don't get enough attention, including some of his sci-fi films. Let's go with AI. The more I watch this movie, the more I like this movie. It's got a lot of difficulties. I know there's the comparison to the fact that it was made by Spielberg, but it was originally supposed to be made by Kubrick before he passed. So Spielberg took over the filming of this movie, and there's obviously differences between the two filmmakers. I don't know what Kubrick would have done with it. I'm sure it would have been interesting and probably very different than what Spielberg did. But the more I watch this movie, the more I appreciate what he did, the more I like what he did, the more I'm impressed with the tragic nature of this story in this movie. And then right after that, he made Minority Report, which is a sci-fi film, but completely different. Completely different. Along with a fantastic lead performance from Tom Cruise and Samantha Morton, in one of the first movies I ever saw her in, but she's brilliant, infinitely brilliant in this movie. Max von Sydow as the head of the company, the head of the group, the people that enforce the crimes, the future crimes. I mean, he's just a legend. He really is. He can do no wrong. I've seen so many movies with him in it. He's fantastic, and he's great in this movie too. Other movies that I would mention, I would definitely mention Munich. That's a tough movie to watch. Not quite as tough as Schindler's List, but it is about another tragic event in the history of our world. The murders of Jewish Israeli athletes at the Olympics, and then the fallout, what happened afterward, how the Mossad and how the Israeli government responded, and how they went after the Germans, how they went after the people who did it. At times it can be tough to watch. But he even made West Side Story. He made the remake of West Side Story recently. He did Ready Player One, but the last one I really want to mention is Lincoln. I love a good history. I love learning about history. I love history. And Lincoln is a fascinating character in and of himself, and this movie is no exception. Daniel Day-Lewis is amazing. Sally Field is incredible. James Spader is so good. I can't understate that, how good this cast is. But I need to highlight Tommy Lee Jones, because I feel like he was robbed. I feel like Tommy Lee Jones was robbed. He is a wonderful performer, and he's proven it time and time again. And for my money, his best performance is in Lincoln. And I'm sad that it got overlooked. So, anyway, I digress. Next is Ridley Scott. Another man who got his start in the late 70s, Alien, anybody? I mean, it's probably the best sci-fi horror movie ever made. That's my opinion. I do honestly think it is. It started a great franchise. He's made the two most recent prequels, Alien Covenant and Prometheus. Don't think of him as a sci-fi guy, because he also did Blade Runner. You got to think of him as a person who can make just about anything. Gladiator, he did, phenomenal. Matchstick Men is this great comedy drama about a con artist played by Nicolas Cage. Highly recommend watching this if you've never seen it. Black Hawk Down, that was him. Thelma and Louise, that was him. So many good movies under his belt that I recommend watching. Ridley Scott, that's a good one. And last but not least, The Martian is another fantastic film of his. That movie, I think, is the pinnacle of all the things that he's good at. Special effects, storytelling, character development, humor, drama, action, thrills, suspense, the whole nine yards. It runs the gamut. If you've never seen The Martian, please do. Last filmmaker on the list, we go back to a classic one from back in the day. We have Alfred Hitchcock. I love a good suspense movie, and that's mostly what he's known for. But if you start watching Hitchcock's movies, you start to learn that he made other things too. One of the funniest movies one of my favorite comedies from the 50s, which is pretty specific, I am aware, but it's also a dark comedy, and it's the first movie Shirley MacLaine ever made, and it's called The Trouble with Harry. I highly recommend watching this movie if you've never seen it, and you may not have, because I feel like it doesn't get noticed as much as other movies of the time. It is great. Basically, the trouble with Harry is that he's dead, and it's such an inconvenience for everybody in town. Let's just leave it at that. I feel it's phenomenal. I also love I love his suspense movies. I love his horror. But he also equally made some good dramas, too. There's a movie called The Wrong Man that came out around the same time as The Trouble with Harry in the 50s that stars Henry Fonda as the wrong man. He's accused of a murder that he didn't commit, and he is... and it's about the struggles that he goes through in jail, waiting trial, and struggles with his family. And so many more. I mean, you know all the movies. I don't need to name The Birds. I don't need to name Psycho. I don't need to name Strangers on a Train, but I will throw those out. I also want to throw out Suspicion while I'm at it, because that's one of the first movies he ever made in this country when he was first brought over to America, and it's phenomenal. As is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, directed by Alfred Hitchcock. Those are some good ones. Those are my top 5 favorite directors. I hope you enjoyed that. And just to give a shout out to a movie that I feel gets overlooked, I want to mention this movie. It's called Now and Then. It came out in the mid-90s, and it was one of the first movies that I ever remember seeing where the leads were all women, were young women. It's a movie told in 2 times. It's told in 1970, and it's told in the mid-90s. It came out in around 95. And besides the cameos, because let's face it, most of the cast of this movie were cameos. Like Brendan Fraser has 1 scene in the movie. Jenny Garofalo, 1 scene. Cloris Leachman, 2 scenes. Lolita Davidovich is in a couple of scenes. Hank Azaria is 1 scene. And they're all great, but the reason you want to watch this movie are for the 8 women who played the 4 leads. In 1970, you have Christina Ricci, Thora Birch, Gabby Hoffman, and the late Ashley Aston Moore, who didn't quite get to have the same career as the others, which is depressing because I've seen a couple of her movies and I very much enjoyed them. But I wanted to give a shout out because she is... all 4 of these characters are great, and they interact, and you get to see their friendships and how they grow over the summer, where most of them are going through something. And then you get to see them in the mid-90s where they come back together because one of them is pregnant and about to have her first child. And the 4 adult versions of the young ladies are, in the same order of character, Rosie O'Donnell, Melanie Griffith, Demi Moore, and Rita Wilson. I just dropped a lot of names on you, I know. All of those are fantastic movies that I mentioned, but that last one, if you missed out on it, it's one of those movies, like I said, it's the first movie I ever saw where all of the leads were females. And it showed good interactions. They weren't at each other's throats. They had each other's backs. Even if they disagreed with one another, they helped support each other in times of need. Excuse me again. And it's just a very entertaining and good movie that I feel like more people should watch. All right, well, that's my movie list for today. It went a little longer than I wanted it to again. Hopefully I'll start getting better at making these a little quicker, but at the moment I feel like I don't know if I could have made that any faster. So I went through a lot. Maybe I'll start tailoring it down to do less in a video. So anyway, hope you enjoy it. Please like and subscribe. If you have any comments, please comment. Let's start discussions. I want to talk about those movies more, get a little more in depth about each of those directors. And I also want to give a shout out to the fact that I will be doing another list soon of directors from nowadays that are starting to build up a good solid reputation. And that'll probably be coming out in the next couple weeks. Yeah, so I hope you enjoy the list. Please like and subscribe, and thank you so much for your time. Enjoy.